Welcome to Infertility and Me podcast, a show that amplifies diverse stories about the struggles of infertility and fertility in a safe space. Our goal is to normalize fertility stories that validate, give hope, and create a community where no one is left silently suffering.
You guys, thank you so much for being here with me on Infertility and Me podcast. I'm your host, Monique Farouk, being here. And today we have a very special guest talking about being childless by circumstance, childless after infertility. I know that this is a very scary subject for us in the community, but it's something that we have to deal with, something that we've had to face, and something that we should take head on from the very beginning. When we're trying to conceive and making sure that we have a plan and that we are okay if that has to be our story. Not saying that it will be, but if that's the case, then we should think about it. And so our guest today is Lana Manikowski. She is a podcaster as well as a life coach. And you can find her at Stitch, STITCH Coaching on Instagram to connect with her and to possibly use her services as a coach. So so Now What podcast is a platform that Lana also has in which she shares ways in which you can live a fulfilling life after infertility and or just deciding to be childless. And so today she's going to share with us her story about how she spent a lifetime dreaming about motherhood, and after 7 years of various fertility treatments and also considering adoption, Lana and her husband decided that they would be childless not by choice, and after infertility. And in this episode, Lana shares with how she judged herself a lot for the adoption process, and she gets into what she ultimately decided about adoption and how she felt about adoption. Everybody's not okay with it, and so Lana shares her process of adoption, seeking adoption possibly, and what that was like for her, and then also considering using donor eggs as well, because that's also another option that people go to when they're over 35, in which Lana is and was at the time of trying to conceive. And so we talk about a lot of different things. So you guys want to make sure that you stick around for the entire episode. All right, so we're back, you guys, with our girl Lana Manikowski. Thank you, Lana, for getting up on this Saturday morning and coming on the show and talking to us. Appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you allowing me to share my story with your listeners.
Oh, absolutely.
I married my husband. I was 35 when I got married.
Okay.
So, depending on where I guess where you lie in your like plan for getting married, I was on what I thought was like the older end of the spectrum. But I had a lot of career goals, and I lived a beautiful 20s and 30s. And so it's like I don't necessarily have regret, but I just never thought I would have trouble getting pregnant. And so when I got married at 35, it was just like, hey, I'm married, let's do this.
Mm-hmm. So did you guys try to start trying to conceive right away, or did you take some time first?
Honestly, we weren't really even paying attention to it. It was about when I was 37, I hadn't gotten pregnant yet. And a close friend of mine who had her children through IVF, I remember being on a phone with her in the grocery store. I was chatting with her. I was doing some grocery shopping, and she was like, have you thought about looking into, getting your levels checked or anything? And, she was saying it from like a loving way. She was a close enough friend that she had been on the infertility path before. So I think she knew more than I did, because I was just kind of like, oh, no, I didn't even think about that. And so I made an appointment with my gynecologist, and they did some initial workup. And sure enough, my levels at 37 were already trending on the lower side. And so that's when I sought treatment with a reproductive endocrinologist here in Chicago. And we did 7 IUIs and 2 IVFs at that clinic. And then I just needed a break. Nothing, I had 2 retrievals, nothing that matured enough to actually have a transfer. And, as many can probably relate, you're kind of like, what? like all that effort, all that time, all that medication and emotion. And I at that point was probably 41. And I was like, okay, maybe I just need to take a little bit of a break. And I wasn't sure whether I was going to pursue treatment again.
Mm-hmm. So did you guys pursue treatment after that, or did you just take some time off from all of it?
We took some time off. And again, another friend, different than the first one, was going through IVF. So I guess my common theme here is, ladies, we're not alone. Like, we have so many friends who have gone through it and can be our champion. So my girlfriend she had done her initial treatments also in Chicago, and ended up going to a clinic in Colorado and had a much different experience and felt like a different energy there. And so I remember being on the phone with her, and she's like, I think you should just try it. At least call and make a consultation appointment and try it again. Like, don't give up. And so I reached out to this clinic in Colorado, and my husband and I had a really nice conversation with the doctor there. And he was very honest. At this point, I was in my 40s. He's like, I don't want to build any hope. I really think that we should do some initial workup before we decide whether it's even, worth you going through IVF. So I was very grateful, because I know that there's a lot of people who have not had that experience where they are encouraged to have treatment and they don't necessarily have, the workup done to tell them whether it's even, worth the time and energy. So I was grateful, and I did that. And so then we ended up doing 2 rounds in Colorado at our clinic there. And I had one embryo that was frozen from my first round in Colorado, and never had any others from my 2. I had a canceled round, and then I'll just never had any others that made it far enough to become frozen. And then, so that was that. And then my one frozen embryo ended up having trisomy 16. So it was not healthy enough to implant. And that's where my story ended with my fertility journey. We talked about egg donors with our clinic there, as well as adoption, and we just needed a minute to process that. And that was it. Like, there was no further communication from them, which that was what they had to offer. So I'm not pointing fingers at them, but that brings me to where I am today, why I decided to create a community for women that are just kind of like, so now what do I do? Where do I go? Because the clinics have done their job of what we want to them to do. And then I just felt like there was no other community for me to sort out in my mind what my life was going to be like if I wasn't going to be a mom.
Yeah, that
So
makes total sense.
that's my story in a nutshell.
Yeah, so it must have been really difficult then, like having the conversation with hubby and then having all those conversations that we have with ourselves about what we're doing. So were there ever times after you said you and hubby decided that we just gonna, our story ends here, we tried, we did the best that we could, but we'll just live our fantastic, fabulous life, just the 2 of us. And so were there ever times where you would go back and forth with yourself?
We did, with adoption, we went back and forth a lot with it. We looked at some international adoption opportunities. We know some friends who have been adopted, some families who have adopted children. So we did do a lot of thought back and forth. And I had a lot of judgment with myself, I would say, when we decided that that wasn't the right road for us. I had a lot of thoughts of, am I not a good person? That I wouldn't want to help a child who needs a family? Am I putting my fear of going through more heartbreak and more sadness and disappointment? Because, we do hear these stories where people have a child in their arms, and at, 20 seconds before, things don't work out. And I had visions of what that would be like. And I really judged myself for a long time when we decided that adoption wasn't going to be the pursuit that we would take to parenthood. I also feel like there's a lot of us that feel like we're not entitled to our sadness about not being moms because we believe that others perceive us as not having tried hard enough or tried all the routes, or, that's why, 80,000 times you hear you could always adopt, and you get this like tinge of how dare they? But a lot of that I come to see now as I'm on the other side of it is us judging ourselves for not adopting. So to answer your question, we did go back and forth a lot and had a lot of question. And I would say even this far down the road, like we sometimes are like, gosh, should we have? And I think that's part of our journey, you know, and I feel blessed that my husband and I have supported each other through this. But there's also a lot of this guilt that I carry that I didn't give him a child too, because he wanted to be a dad. He's never said that, but yeah. So
yeah. How did you move forward in healing yourself, and did you get therapy to help you, or a coach or some sort of counselor to help you move through those emotions? And especially with the guilt and the adoption, that's heavy, that's deep, that's really deep. A lot of people won't say that out loud, like, I don't want to adopt, you know what I mean? And I think that's really brave of you for being able to admit it to yourself and be honest with others, like, I want genetically born children, and adoption is for a lot of other people, but it's not for me. So did you get any help or anything?
I didn't, but I remember going back to my acupuncturist that helped me through acupuncture as I was going through my cycles, and being so like grasping for any help I could get. And I remember feeling like, gosh, there's got to be like someone out there who helps women after this, you know. So, you know, again, that was like that feeling of loneliness I was feeling. And I remember her telling me, well, I don't really know anyone who helps women, you know, post IVF and after they don't have kids, but here's a therapist that some people I know have gone to. And I just never called anyone because I felt like no one would understand me. And I just came into this like whole shell of a like that I built around me. And I remember just showing up to things and just being there physically, but just not emotionally being engaged with a lot of my friends' events. Cause, you know, of course, people were having baby showers and registering and gender reveals. And I remember just showing up and just being like, okay, like you got to get through this. So I did it alone. And then I ended up working with a coach for myself, who I found, ironically, through the weight gain I experienced after my IVF treatments. You know, a lot of us experience some weight fluctuation from the hormones. And it was like 2 or 3 years later, and I still had these pounds packed on me where I historically didn't carry weight like that before. And so I found this woman who was a weight loss coach, because I had tried Weight Watchers, I had tried the kit and caboodle, Whole30, this, that, intermittent fasting. And turns out I didn't even know it, but she was a certified life coach, and just her niche happened to be in weight loss. And so when I joined, her name is Corinne Crabtree, when I joined her program, No BS, I finally discovered that we could create new beliefs about ourselves, and we could give up that old story, and we could love ourselves despite being infertile and being childless. And so it was working with her that allowed me to start rewriting my story about myself and about what I had experienced, and then giving me the motivation to do this for others that were looking for someone that had been on the road that they are on or have been on. So that's when I got my certification as a life coach.
Wonderful. Wow. What a process. And working through all of that, and just like you say, rediscovering who you are, and so that you can fall back in love with yourself. I think with infertility, we fall out of love with ourselves, you know, and we despise our bodies for not doing what it was created to do, essentially. And I think, I think that's really important, and it's fantastic that you've done that and been able to hold on to it. I think a lot of people go through certain courses and or help with counselors or therapists, and then they don't complete it. They stop. It gets to be too much. Did you ever have times like that where working through your grief from infertility and being childless after infertility, and even just accepting that you're going to be a childless by circumstance couple and individual, and things just didn't work out the way you thought they would?
I think it's something, truly that I still work on every day. And I tell my clients that all the time, that there's never a day that the switch turns off from wanting to be a mom. And then all of a sudden you're like, my life is magnificent and I just can't travel and do all these like bougie things that like people that have kids envision we do when we don't have kids.
Yes.
But I always tell my clients, there's always this piece in your heart that will have that love for being a mother and the desire to be a mother and the hurt and all the things that we went through. And there's nothing wrong with visiting that part of your heart, whether it's daily or hourly, and just respecting that it's just part of your journey. Because had you not experienced the sadness and the defeat and the failure that we felt, we would never allow ourselves to get past it if we just ignore it and just don't act like it's there. So I very much, when things trigger me, or, just even that you could always adopt comment, it's something that I have worked on even as recent as 2 weeks ago, when someone I hadn't seen forever saw me and were like, oh, whatever happened? Did you become a mom? And I, said, no, we weren't able to. Well, you could always adopt. And I felt this jolt and I was like, okay, Lana, time to get to work. And so I think that the healing process is just something that I've accepted is just going to be part of my journey. And I find beauty in my ability to not judge myself and just mother those emotions as though I'm a mom to me, if that makes sense. Like just have compassion for that part of me that feels the sadness, and bring myself to a place that I can love myself, even despite the sadness and the judgment that I sometimes still feel for myself.
Were there, or are there times even now where you think, well, maybe we should just give it one more shot?
I am finally to a point where I'm like resigned myself that I'm not going to go through fertility treatments anymore. I'll be 48 next month. So I'm to that point where I'm like, okay, reality is I probably won't be getting pregnant naturally. And so I think I'm finally at this point that I'm like, okay, this is it. And I think my coaching has really, coaching personally, but also developing myself as I became a coach and got my certification, of being optimistic about what I could create with the future instead of living in my past, and being more past focused, which is something that I work a lot on with myself and my clients too.
And so, and you've stated some things before, but specifically to those who may be in limbo about whether they should stop, what was your experience with working through those feelings and those ideas and that picture in your head that we all, play back, like, no, I can't see myself walking away, or, just what was the point where you knew that you just, this was it, this had to stop? What was that breaking point?
I would say it was just the constant emotional cycles of getting your hope up and then dealing with the defeat, the constant indecision of what my life was going to be like, planning my life, planning a trip, doing anything, because I just never knew where I would be in a cycle, or would I need to be in Colorado, Chicago, where I would be. But, I truly believe that we as women have such gifts of really knowing our inner self, and we have this voice. And I got to a point where I was just like, trust yourself, that being a mom, as much as it was something that I prayed for since I was a young girl, I always wanted to be a mom. I knew that God had his plan, and I knew that he would take care of me and guide me in whatever road I took. And so I just really tapped into that inner voice of, you're going to be okay. You're talented. You have a great job. You're successful. You're smart. You have a loving family and husband. And being a mother, as much as I wanted that, I knew that I could still create a beautiful life with the gifts that I've been given as a human. So I just encourage other women to just tap into that inner voice. And it may seem so confusing sometimes because it's not always clear, but if you just give yourself some time to really do like thought work, I call it paper thinking. So getting out of your mind and writing down the things that are coming up for you, and just have that sacred space with yourself to really tap into you. I think that the answers will come to you. So for me, I knew that that's what was right for me. And I encourage others to just sit with themselves and trust that they have the inner knowledge within them.
Because it was probably quite terrifying, knowing that you were getting ready to lay this part of your life to the side and to rest, really. And a lot of people are scared of having to make that decision and working through that fear. How do you coach people and who are working through that fear of possibly having to walk away forever from trying to conceive?
Well, it's definitely a process that we work on quite often. And I think one of the things we have to start with asking ourselves was motherhood a goal, or was it an expectation we had of ourselves? Because a lot of times we just have this expectation that you're born a female and you should pop out kids, but we never even ask ourselves, was that something that we truly wanted? Is that the thing that we just were told generationally that, if you're a woman, you should be popping out kids by the time you're 25. And I think a lot of the things that we work on is really understanding what we wanted to achieve from motherhood. And if it's a greater purpose in our life, I don't think that, although motherhood, and I would never sway anyone away from trying to be a mom, or mothers that work hard and do all the things that they do, but what are you wanting that child to give you your purpose in life? Because if you're expecting your purpose to be based on somebody else, even if it is your own child, there's going to be opportunity for you to lose belief in yourself and who you are. So we do a lot of work on what it is about us as individuals that we're proud of. What are the things we want to develop? What are the things that give us our true purpose in life, if it's not going to be based on somebody else? So there's a lot that goes into that. So I have something that I work on. It's a believe, feel, act cycle. So it's kind of this thing I take my clients through. So when you believe a certain way, or have a belief about yourself or your circumstance, it causes you to feel whatever feeling comes up based on that belief. And when you're feeling that way, you're going to take specific actions or inaction, recoil, revert from hanging out with people because you're feeling embarrassed because your body didn't work like it was supposed to. So kind of understanding where these beliefs are about you and whether they're valid anymore. Do they really play a role in your life anymore? Do you want to move forward the next 50 years of your life believing that about you? Or we work on creating new beliefs that will take you into the future that you want to have.
Yeah, that's great.
So it's called the BFA cycle. So
yeah, that's definitely
it's
a process.
Yeah,
definitely a process. So when did you get the idea? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, though, a lot of people shy away from doing work on themselves because they feel like it's going to be a lot of work, and it's not. I'm proof. I mean, I was somebody who just was one of those strong chin person, like I can handle anything. Like I was just kind of taught that you work hard and you just don't complain. And, my father came to this country at 17, didn't speak English. Like I saw him as an example of somebody who just like put his nose to the ground and worked. And I never believed in thought work. I never thought that I could really make a difference in my own life by recognizing my beliefs and the things that I was saying about myself and to myself. And it's just amazing how easy it is once you really purposely do the work on yourself. And so a lot of people are like, oh, it's, that's all fluff. It's not going to make a difference in my life, or I'm way too far gone to ever get on the other side of things. But I can tell you that if I could do it, anybody can. I'm no special snowflake. It's just understanding a different way of asking yourself questions. And that's really what I try to do is with my clients. I don't want them to be lifelong clients. I want to give them the tools that they can take from me and my guidance, and then just be on their way, creating an amazing life that they love again.
Yeah. And so if there's anything else you would like to say to those still in the midst of trying to conceive, specifically, that something that they can hold on to take with them, and then from there we'll go into your platforms.
Okay, so I would say just believe that what you're doing is good enough, that there's nothing, if you have a protocol, you're following that protocol. If you're 10 minutes off from taking your shot, that wasn't the reason why, it didn't work this time for you. And I think we put so much pressure and self-judgment on ourselves, but just know that you're doing your best. You're in the best hands. You're going to take care of yourself, and just love yourself through this process and be proud of yourself, because the women that I know that have gone through fertility treatments are some of the most strong and powerful women. I mean, the fact that we wake up every morning and go to these monitoring appointments and get blood draws, and we look like pin cushions, and then we still show up in our 9-to-5 job in our daily lives, just slaying it. I mean, I just have to tell you, love yourself and have so much respect for yourself.
Yes, I love that. And so tell us about the So Now What podcast and how you came up with that idea.
Well, the So Now What podcast, I am 32 episodes in, so I come out with my podcast every Tuesday. And for me, I came out with it just to create a forum that I didn't have for myself. So I left that last meeting with my, doctor in Colorado asking, so now what? And I think that continued on for several years. And so I just wanted to create a place that women could go to and just know that they're not alone in their journey. And I really, I have a lot of back and forth interaction from my listeners, which I love. I'm sure you do the same. Like, what do you want to hear? What are you struggling with? How can I help? And so a lot of my content is based on what people bring to me that they want to talk about. I also try to keep my episodes like 10 to 15 minutes long, just like a quick, you can pop it on your way to work, or, as you're getting ready in the morning. And I give a little bit of homework every week. So something that if somebody is not at a place that they're wanting to do coaching or hire, me to work with them, I just fully believe that I want to offer people value, whether they are able to pay for it or not. So every week I give a little bit of lesson of something to work on. And then people are out. I keep my DMs open for anyone to ask me questions. So the So Now What podcast is just an opportunity to let you know that regardless of where you are in this journey, there's always an opportunity for you to believe in yourself, that you're the best version of yourself.
Yes, great. Wonderful. Thank you, Lana, for that. Excuse me, I'm so groggy today. Have to edit this out. Jeez. Sorry. Getting over this sinus infection. Well, thank you, Lana, for that and for all that you have shared with us today. You've given us some really valuable things to think about, and also moving forward with this next year with things like kind of returning to normal and having to be in spaces and events more often. I feel like COVID was like a break for that for a lot of people over the last 2 years. And so, yeah, and then, we'll by the time this comes out, we'll be right in the midst of summer. So, it's going to be a lot to deal with this summer. And so I appreciate you. And so where can we find you on the gram? What's the name of your handle?
My handle is Stitch Coaching, STITCH Coaching. And my website is stitchcoaching.com.
Wonderful. Thank you for that as well. And so you guys, thank you for tuning in for another episode of Infertility and Me podcast. You guys know where to find me. Infertility and Me podcast on Instagram for all of your fertility related content and updates about the podcast and community. And we'll well, we'll not see you, but you'll be listening next time in 2 weeks. Thank you guys, and peace and blessings.